the 10th of October 1998. A black car stops in front of a golf course in Brooklyn. Inside, Joey M., a veteran of organized crime in New Jersey, waits. He's drowning in debt, his luck has run out, and every phone call could be his last. That night, it is. A familiar face approaches his window. Without a word, the barrel of a gun gleams under the dim light. A single shot. Game over. Joey is not a fictional character. He's not Tony Soprano. But his story and his world inspired one of the most influential television series in modern history. This is the true story. Divided Territory. The silent war for control of New Jersey. In the shadows of northern New Jersey, among illegal gambling, quiet betrayals, and cold-blooded executions, a criminal organization rose that operated for decades outside the bounds of respect, but never outside the bounds of power. While New York stole the spotlight and the fame, this family built an empire from the cracks of anonymity. Today, we uncover their story, from their Sicilian origins to their downfall at the hands of the FBI, through internal wars, alliances with the Gambinos, and a bloody legacy of silence and loyalty. At the beginning of the 1932nd, the state of New Jersey was a chessboard divided among multiple pieces of organized crime. Some groups were local, born in the working-class neighborhoods of the region. Others arrived carrying the weight and influence of the great Mafia families of New York and Philadelphia. While New York bosses like Giuseppe Meria and Gaetano Rana consolidated their operations in the northern part of the state, the ties with the Jewish Mafia and Manhattan's criminal networks made the balance of power even more complex. From the south, the Philadelphia family, led by Salvatore Sabella, also contested control over routes, ports, and illicit businesses. But the true kings of New Jersey were two rival figures. On one side, Gaspare D'Amico, who ruled with an iron fist from Newark, backed by New York. On the other, Stefano Badami, the quiet but calculating boss of Elizabeth. Gaspare was born in 1886, a small Sicilian village. Alongside his brother, he emigrated to the United States in search of fortune and found it in the forbidden alcohol of prohibition, forming a group of smugglers that, over the years, evolved into a feared criminal organization. Stefano Badami was born in Corleone, Palermo, in 1888. He spent his youth in Sicily, marrying a woman from his village before setting off for America. In a short time, he became an influential figure, building his power base in Elizabeth, at the heart of New Jersey. During the years of Prohibition, organized crime in New Jersey was anything but organized. While Badami controlled the city of Elizabeth, D'Amico expanded his businesses from New York. Both trafficked alcohol, evading the law, and clashing with each other's factions for control of routes and territories. Tensions reached their peak with the outbreak of the Castella-Marese War, a violent conflict between the most powerful mafia factions of New York. The confrontation ended in April 1931, when Salvatore Maranzano emerged victorious and proclaimed himself Capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses, restructuring New York's underworld into 5 families. Maranzano's victory had immediate consequences. Badami was officially recognized as the head of the Elizabeth organization. But in the Mafia, power rarely lasts long. Head of the Elizabeth organization. But in the Mafia, power rarely lasts long. On the 10th of September 1931, Maranzano was brutally murdered in his office by 4 hitmen disguised as federal agents. The hit had been orchestrated by Charles "Lucky" Luciano, his former ally who had now turned against him. After Maranzano's assassination, the purge reached his sympathizers. Among the targets, Stefano Badami. In the following months, several of his closest men, including his second-in-command, Sam Monaco, were eliminated one by one. Threatened and cornered, Badami chose to withdraw from the scene, at least temporarily. In his absence, a new name emerged to lead the Elizabeth family: power vacuums, blood, rebellion, and dangerous inheritances. In 1935, a former ally of Maranzano named Vano Tria began to devise an ambitious plan to seize control of the northern New Jersey Mafia by force. Tria was a veteran of crime, hardened by the Castellammarese War. At the age of 26, he already had blood on his hands. He had murdered a loan shark who demanded an impossible debt. His rise was swift, and although he had supported the winning side in New York's Mafia conflict, Maranzano's death left his position in limbo. Convinced that he had been robbed of his rightful power, Tria decided to take what he believed was his. But on the 22nd of August 1935, before he could carry out his revenge, he was killed. It is suspected that D'Amico's men were behind the murder. With his death, northern New Jersey once again descended into chaos. 2 years later, another name emerged. Joseph Profaci, Sicilian boss of an influential mafia family, attempted to eliminate D'Amico. Although his direct involvement was never confirmed, many believed that a businessman with strong connections had financed the hit out of old loyalties to Maranzano. The message was clear. D'Amico was no longer untouchable. Facing enemies too powerful to confront, he fled the United States and escaped to Sicily. His departure left a new power vacuum. The northern New Jersey family then appointed its new official boss, Filippo Amari, former underboss of Badami. Amari directed his efforts toward union extortion, smuggling, and drug trafficking in the New York region. However, his reign would be short-lived. Old tensions between New York and Elizabeth resurfaced once more. In less than 2 years, a silent rebellion was brewing. After Amari's fall, he too fled to Sicily. The organization was again left without leadership. The vacuum was filled by Nick Delmore, a traditional Sicilian mobster from Nicosia who had served as underboss to the family. Unlike his predecessors, Delmore avoided controversy. His discreet profile and reputation as a respectable man helped calm internal tensions. Under his command, the Elizabeth family began to consolidate itself as a fully functional criminal structure, though always under the shadow of New York's great families. By the late 1952, the group had between 30 and 35 officially made members, making it one of the smallest mafia families in the country. That condition, along with its location and lack of historical prestige, caused the New York families to see them as little more than a branch office rather than a family in its own right. In fact, when aspiring mafiosi failed to gain acceptance into the 5 families, they were often sent to New Jersey, an unmistakable sign of their place in the hierarchy. Even so, the family held a seat on the Commission of Organized Crime and was represented at the famous Appalachian meeting in 1957, organized by Vito Genovese. Nick Delmore attended accompanied by Caporegime Fran Moretti and underboss Louis Larasso. Moretti, born in April 1909, had been a career criminal since his youth in New Jersey. When Amari took power, he promoted him to consigliere, a move that confirmed his influence within the organization. But with Delmore's rise, Moretti was demoted back to capo. Begrudgingly, he accepted the demotion. In his place, the young Larasso was promoted to consigliere. Thus began a new era for the family. A new generation took control while the old guard receded into the shadows. The plumber of crime, the Mafia's rebirth in the shadows. Year 1964, in a hospital in northern New Jersey, Nick Delmore, head of the local crime family, lies on his deathbed. Before drawing his last breath, he makes a crucial decision. He names his nephew, Simone DeCavalcante, as his successor. Born the 30th of April 1913. In Brooklyn, Simone was the son of Italian immigrants and had grown up in Trenton, New Jersey. His bond with the Mafia was both of blood and vocation. From a young age, he carved his path through the underworld until, 5 decades later, he became the undisputed boss of the organization. At that time, the family was still seen as a disorganized group of provincial criminals. To the New York mobsters, they were nothing but peasants with ambition. But Simone DeCavalcante was not an ordinary man. Elegant, calculating, and clear in vision, he transformed that scattered crew into a respected and feared regional mafia power. He introduced new rules, mandatory dress codes, restrictions on facial hair, and even reformed the initiation ritual, removing the traditional knife, pistol, and burning of the sacred image. For Simone, those symbols were nothing but unnecessary theater. He didn't care how New York perceived him. He had other plans for his family. To the outside world, Simone DeCavalcante was simply a respectable businessman. His front, a plumbing store in Kenilworth, New Jersey, called Kenilworth Plumbing Company. That's how he earned his nickname, Sam the Plumber. But Sam didn't fix pipes. Behind that mask of legality, he ran one of the most structured criminal empires on the East Coast. He had stakes in loan sharking operations, illegal gambling houses, pornography trafficking, and multiple side businesses that generated millions of dollars, all with cold, professional efficiency. His style was elegant, refined. He spoke with diplomacy, enjoyed luxury, and preferred to be called Prince Sam, or even the Count. Despite his hidden brutality, he was smart enough never to leave a trace. He never spent a night behind bars. Under his command, the number of officially initiated men doubled from 30 to 60 members spread across activities as diverse as they were illegal. One of them, and perhaps the most unusual, was Gaetano Tommy Vastola. Born the 20th of May 1928, Vastola lived a double life. On one side, a mobster, on the other, a key figure in the music industry. He began his criminal career at 18 with a robbery in New York. He was arrested, but his youth earned him a light sentence and early parole. By the 1952, he had infiltrated the music business and used his mob influence to manipulate the market. Based in Brooklyn, Vastola became a promoter for popular musicians and played a crucial role in the rise of Roulette Records, founded by Maurice Levy in 1957. The label grew rapidly, producing doo-wop and pop hits, and Vastola's name even appeared as co-writer on numerous records. But his most profitable business wasn't music, it was illegal duplication. Record counterfeiting earned him over $500,000. Vastola's career began to crumble in 1960, when he was sentenced to 1 year in prison for trademark forgery. 5 years later, he was arrested again for robbery and spent a long period behind bars. Meanwhile, the DeCavalcante family continued to evolve. Simone promoted new key men to maintain internal balance. Louis Larasso was confirmed as underboss, while Charles Majuri was appointed consigliere. The move was well received. It symbolized a new generation within the organization. That same year, a request arrived from the top of the New York Mafia. Carlo Gambino, supreme boss of his family, asked the DeCavalcantes to get rid of one of their own men, Joey Fola. Fola was a key figure in the profitable waste collection business in Westchester, New York. But his ambitions were crossing dangerous lines. He planned to expand north into New Jersey, territory controlled by the DeCavalcante family. It was a problem. And like every problem in the Mafia, it was solved with silence. The order was clear: eliminate him. One night, Fola was summoned to a garage in New Jersey. There, he was strangled and his body secretly buried. After his death, James Fiore, another of Gambino's trusted men, took over his trash empire. But while the DeCavalcantes were unknowingly doing favors, another silent enemy was closing in. The FBI had intercepted their conversations. Without their knowledge, federal agents had been monitoring every word, every deal, every betrayal. And soon, the noose would tighten. Wired Mafia. When the Cosa Nostra was recorded. The 23rd of October 1964. Thomas J. Dunn, mayor of Elizabeth, New Jersey, walks into Sam DeCavalcante's office. He has a problem. 2 men are threatening his political campaign. He doesn't need proof, trials, or paperwork, only results. Sam listens carefully. He offers his full support, but sets one condition: preferential access to the city's public contracts. What neither of them knew was that, at that very moment, every word was being recorded. Between 1961 and 1965, the FBI conducted one of the boldest surveillance operations in its history. It installed hidden microphones in 4 strategic locations across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. One of them, inside Kenilworth Plumbing Company, DeCavalcante's camouflaged headquarters. The recordings captured direct conversations between the mob boss and his trusted men. But he wasn't the only target. The operation also monitored Angelo Bruno, Philadelphia's boss, and Gerardo Catena, from New York's Genovese family. It all began with a betrayal. In 1963, Joseph Valachi, a soldier in the Genovese family, broke his silence. He became the first Italian mobster to publicly testify about the existence of the Cosa Nostra. His confession exposed secrets the government had suspected for years and gave the FBI the perfect excuse to start its espionage campaign. But Joseph Valachi wasn't always an informant. His story began on the streets, as part of a youth gang known for its quick robberies, smashing shop windows, looting what they could, and vanishing before the police arrived. In 1921, at just 17, Valachi was arrested for grand larceny. 2 years later, during a failed heist, he was sent to the infamous Sing Sing prison. He was released after serving half his sentence and returned to Harlem, only to find his getaway driver job already taken. So, he formed his own crew. By 1930, his name was already echoing through the underworld. That same year, he was formally initiated into the Mafia under Gaetano Reina's wing. In 1932, he sealed his bond with the organization by marrying into a mob family. When Salvatore Maranzano proclaimed himself boss of all bosses, Valachi became his bodyguard. After Maranzano's assassination, he went on to work for Lucky Luciano, quickly rising as one of his trusted men under the supervision of Tony Strollo. But in 1959, everything changed. Valachi was convicted of drug trafficking and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Convinced that his boss, Vito Genovese, had ordered his execution, Valachi descended into paranoia. He mistook a fellow inmate for a supposed hitman sent by the family and killed him with an iron bar. It was the beginning of the end. In 1963, he broke the sacred oath of silence and became the first mobster to publicly testify about the existence of the Cosa Nostra. His testimony unleashed a wave of anti-mafia operations across the country. And thanks to that confession, the FBI could justify the unthinkable, recording a mob boss in real time. The tapes recorded inside the Kenilworth plumbing store captured Sam DeCavalcante openly discussing at least 8 murders. One of them was that of Willie Moretti. Moretti was the underboss of the Genovese family, back when it was still known as the Luciano family and a cousin of the legendary Frank Costello. But in the 1950 seconds, he began to lose his mind. He suffered from advanced syphilis, and his erratic behavior became a danger to everyone. In October 1951, during a lunch in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, he was executed by his own associates. They laughed together in Italian, and then, without warning, one of them pulled a gun and shot him point blank. The FBI recordings didn't just document past murders, they also revealed internal debates about moral codes within the organization. In one recorded conversation, Sam DeCavalcante spoke with regret about the murder of Charles Cavallaro, a mob member from Youngstown, Ohio. Cavallaro had been killed by a hand grenade during a territorial dispute, but the explosion also killed his one-year-old son. Despite his role as a mafia boss, DeCavalcante rejected that kind of violence. He considered the use of explosives unacceptable, contrary to the traditional values of the Cosa Nostra. As a result of that incident, an unwritten rule was established within the mob world. No killings. With grenades. At another point, he was asked to approve another murder. An African-American construction worker had allegedly hit the son of a mobster during a fight. Some demanded revenge. But DeCavalcante, fearing a conflict with the Nation of Islam, refused to give the green light. The ethics of the mafia were twisted, but within their own rules, Sam had his limits. In early 1965, the boss met with Joseph Ziccarelli, an associate of the Bonanno family known for his shady dealings. They discussed the possible deportation of Emanuel Rich Zarrelli, a mobster facing immigration problems. Sam, ever the politician, suggested contacting Congressman Cornelius Gallagher, representative of New Jersey's 13th District. According to DeCavalcante, Gallagher could fix the issue quietly. Everything was recorded. Authorities listened as Sam spoke with policemen, businessmen, politicians, mobsters, and public figures. The list of names and compromising secrets was long and explosive. The Goodfellas tapes, as they would later be known, did more than capture the sins of the North Jersey Mafia. They revealed the invisible machinery that connected organized crime to the institutions of power, the heist of the century, betrayal, loaded dice, and mafia revenge. Among the thousands of hours of FBI recordings captured inside the Kenilworth store, one conversation revealed something beyond crime. It exposed an emotional fracture. For the first time, Sam DeCavalcante let slip his disillusionment with the very Cosa Nostra he had sworn to serve. It all began when Carlo Gambino, one of New York's most influential bosses, refused to back the DeCavalcante family during a key vote within the commission. Instead of supporting New Jersey, Gambino sided with Joe Colombo, his protégé and the rising leader of a new family. Sam didn't take it well. On one of the tapes, his voice can be clearly heard saying, "Colombo is like a kid. He does everything Carlo wants. The more you see, the more disappointed you get." Loyalty in the Mafia was a double-edged sword, and Sam was beginning to feel its blade cut deep. But while his faith wavered, the machinery of crime kept turning. In 1966, two of his most trusted men, Gaetano Vastola and Daniel Annunziata, were sent to a clandestine dice game at a motel in Pennsylvania. The plan was simple but brilliant. They entered as regular players, sat down, placed their bets, and then feigned outrage when they discovered that the dice were loaded. At that moment, they pulled out their guns and demanded an immediate payment of $20,000. But in the Mafia, even robberies were negotiated. Over the next 6 weeks, 3 meetings were held between the game's organizers, the robbers, and Sam DeCavalcante himself, who had orchestrated the entire operation from the start. The final deal, a payment of $12,000, of which $3,800 went directly into the boss's pocket. The motel heist didn't go unnoticed. The operation had been so meticulously executed that, ironically, it was its perfection that raised suspicions. Shortly after, Sam DeCavalcante and his associate Bruno were arrested and charged with forging driver's licenses. But that was only the beginning. In March of the following year, DeCavalcante, Vastola, and Annunziata were formally indicted for conspiring to violate federal extortion laws. The case was part of a 17-month federal investigation. The Kenilworth recordings had paid off. The FBI raided the shop and found 4 illegal firearms. On July 18, Sam was arrested again, this time for possession of a stolen .38 caliber revolver. The prosecution directly linked him to the extortion plot in Pennsylvania. His lawyer, Sidney Franz Blau, began challenging the legality of the wiretaps. On the 17th of January 1969, he requested full access to the evidence and received an explosive dossier, 2,300 transcribed pages of the Goodfellas tapes. On June 10, he filed a motion for Sam's official release. That's when a key detail came to light. The recordings had been made without a court warrant. Legally, they couldn't be used as evidence. But the damage was already done. Franz Blau, a former federal prosecutor, made a fatal mistake. He didn't request that the transcripts be sealed for the defense only. The result was devastating. The entire report became public, and with it, dozens of secrets surfaced. Names, operations, figures, and connections between organized crime and government institutions. The myth of the silent mafia had begun to crumble. On the 16th of December 1969, a grand jury indicted more than 55 individuals, including Sam DeCavalcante. The main charge, operating a $20 million interstate gambling system, one of the largest in the country at the time. On the 2nd of January 1970, he was formally charged with illegal gambling. A new trial began in April, but was temporarily suspended when the boss fell seriously ill. The end of an era was drawing near. The big house, fall, trial, and judicial revenge. Afflicted by bronchitis, Sam DeCavalcante was brought back to court. This time, it was for the Trevos extortion case. One of the victims of the plot took the stand against him, revealing every detail of the operation. For the government, there was no longer any doubt Sam wasn't just a bystander. He was the mastermind behind the network. The defense, without witnesses or solid evidence, couldn't overturn the narrative. DeCavalcante insisted that it was all a setup, that he was nothing more than a mediator caught in a shadowy dispute. But no one believed him. On the 24th of September 1970, the leader of the DeCavalcante crime family was found guilty on 3 counts of conspiracy. It was his first official conviction. The sentence: 15 years in prison. He was furious. Vastola and Annunziata, his accomplices in the Pennsylvania Dice robbery case, were also convicted. But in January of the following year, Sam was summoned to a secret hearing in New York. There, he agreed to plead guilty to an additional conspiracy charge. The trial wasn't made public immediately. Authorities wanted to protect the rights of the other defendants. Then, on March 10, the story took an unexpected turn. Judge Harlan Adams of the Philadelphia Court of Appeals overturned the Trevos conviction. A 3-judge panel ruled that the evidence was insufficient. Vastola and Annunziata were released. But DeCavalcante wasn't as lucky. He remained in custody. The U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey refused to release him, citing his involvement in another investigation, this time for illegal gambling and weapons possession. Justice was finally catching up. And for the first time in his career, Sam had no way out. In March 1971, Sam DeCavalcante was ultimately sentenced to 1 year in prison and fined $10,000 for his role in the illegal gambling ring. But it wouldn't end there. On August 17 of that same year, he was charged again, this time for possession of the .38 caliber revolver that federal agents had confiscated 3 years earlier. The former New Jersey Mafia boss was now officially behind bars. During his imprisonment, he surprised everyone. He chose to work as a nurse inside the prison. The facility's chief medical officer publicly praised him, saying Sam was one of the best resident nurses they'd had in years. He maintained exemplary behavior and, on the 20th of December 1973, was granted parole. However, he hadn't changed entirely. In early 1974, he was arrested for driving his Cadillac at 77 miles per hour on a highway with a 55-mile limit. Though he claimed health problems, chronic bronchitis, and managed to postpone the trial twice, an officer spotted him walking down the street days later, in perfect condition. He never showed up to his hearing. By 1976, at age 63, Sam decided to fade from the spotlight. He moved to South Florida, where his family maintained several active criminal operations. He planned to build a legitimate casino, but the project was cancelled when the state rejected the legalization of gambling. Finally, in 1980, Sam DeCavalcante retired from crime. 2 years later, he officially stepped down, closing one of the most notorious chapters in the history of organized crime in New Jersey. A man who ran a mafia family out of a plumbing shop. A plumber who left his mark on the FBI's archives and on the hidden foundations of the United States. The silent ego, a boss between loyalty and honor. With Sam DeCavalcante's retirement, the family needed a new leader. The choice was logical: Giovanni John Righi. He had grown up within the Mafia ecosystem, the son of one of the organization's soldiers. Yet, in his early years, he led an apparently normal life. He was president of his high school class of 1,942, and after graduation, enlisted in the U.S. Army during World War II. When he returned home, he fully integrated into the Mafia family. John Righi wasn't like other bosses. He was eloquent, respected, and although he didn't shy away from violence, he preferred to avoid it. Diplomatic, meticulous, and surprisingly paternal, he earned both the respect and the fear of his men. He was the kind of leader who, if his crew fell, was willing to go to prison for them. Every Sunday, the criminal family would gather at Café Italia Righi's restaurant, located right across from a social club that raised funds for families in need in Sicily. Gestures like that made him one of Sam DeCavalcante's favorites. On the 2nd of October 1964, Riggi, already an official member, was promoted to the rank of captain. By the mid-1972s, he had gained complete control over the family's construction sector. He did it all: bribery, extortion, and at the same time, he worked as an official agent of the International Association of Laborers and Carriers, from which he ran multiple illegal schemes, including loan sharking and underground gambling. When DeCavalcante was sentenced to 5 years in prison in 1978, John Riggi was named acting boss, and it didn't take long for him to authorize his first major move, an internal strike to consolidate his power. His first hit as acting boss was direct and lethal. The victim, John Sorato, a low-profile member of the organization and the uncle by marriage of Vincent Palermo, who would later become one of the family's central figures. Sorato spent his days on the streets, entangled in small hustles, and maintained a long-standing family dispute with his sister. One night, while sitting in his car, Vincent Palermo and his brother Patsy approached and opened fire without warning. He was killed instantly. The message was clear: times were changing. Soon after, police found another body, this time Vincenzo Soria, a local businessman discovered under the Goethals Bridge in Elizabeth. He had clashed with another member of the organization, and in that world, that was reason enough to disappear. Now, as full boss, John Riggi launched a deep restructuring of the family. He reinstated forgotten rituals, such as the burning of the sacred card during initiation ceremonies, and reorganized the hierarchy. His former rivals Charles Maggiore and Louis Larasso were gradually pushed aside. One of the most significant moves was the removal of Moretti from his role as consigliere. In his place, he appointed Stefano "Steve" Vitabile, a man who had joined the family in the 1972s under Riggi's own mentorship. Over time, Vitabile would become one of the most feared figures in the organization. After Moretti's death in 1983, his son Charles inherited control of his crew, but his power gradually faded, the same erosion that had weakened his father since the 1962s. Finally, the position was handed to Vincent Palermo, an experienced, shrewd, and ambitious gangster whose story was just beginning to unfold and who would soon change the course of the family forever. Vincent Palermo, the silent killer. The 13th of September 1960. In a small bar in Elizabeth, New Jersey, called Zini's Tavern, Alfonso Colicchio, the owner, stands behind the counter when Vincent Palermo enters with several men. Without warning, they begin beating him mercilessly. Colicchio tries to defend himself, but Palermo draws a gun and fires. The crime wasn't impulsive. The order came directly from then family boss Nick Delmore. Days earlier, the bar owner had made the mistake of disrespecting him publicly. In the Mafia, that was a death sentence. However, Palermo acted carefully. He kept the murder off the radar, protected by his family ties. He was the brother-in-law of a high-ranking member of the organization. His silence was his shield. In the years that followed, Palermo rose quietly. By the early 1980s, he had already been promoted to underboss of the family. Louis Larasso, a man with a fiery temper, disagreed with the promotion, but the decision wasn't his to make. At that time, John Riggi was running one of the most profitable schemes in organized crime: control of the labor unions. He managed it alongside Joe Mary and Joseph Spagnuolo, two powerful capos. Between them, they moved millions of dollars a year. Riggi was cautious. He never said anything incriminating over the phone. He avoided sensitive conversations even in person. In fact, he would drive miles just to speak from public payphones, using short, coded phrases. On the streets, he never acted like a boss. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't draw attention. And, just like his protégé Palermo, he knew when to strike and when to disappear. John Riggi kept such a low profile that even in risky situations, he calculated every move. On one occasion, Riggi contacted a local businessman and asked to meet at a hotel restaurant in Linden. But the businessman, secretly collaborating with law enforcement, alerted New Jersey's Organized Crime Task Force. The police planted a hidden microphone at the table assigned for the meeting. When Riggi arrived, he was escorted straight to that spot. Outside, agents monitored every word. During the conversation, Riggi casually mentioned that New Jersey was very favorable to unions. A seemingly innocent comment, but for investigators, it confirmed his deep ties to labor racketeering. As they talked, several union leaders in the restaurant approached him respectfully to greet him. The businessman, impressed by Riggi's influence, began openly cooperating with him after that meeting. Riggi, however, was fully aware that his time would come. He knew that sooner or later, prison was inevitable. He began to prepare himself mentally and physically. He spent hours alone in empty rooms, meditating. He started training his body and quietly closing unfinished business. In a rare gesture, he traveled to Orange with another mobster. There, he visited an old butcher whose life he had once saved. He had never asked the man for anything until that day. "If I ever end up in prison, take care of my family." In 1986, Riggi was appointed president of Union Council 30 and consultant for Local 394, two key positions he used as fronts to expand his influence in the construction sector. That racket would become the most profitable operation in the organization. But calm never lasts long in the Mafia. The Gambinos, New York's shadow, New Jersey's edge. The 16th of December, 1985. Paul Castellano, supreme boss of the Gambino family, sits in his 1985 Lincoln outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. His underboss, Thomas Bilotti, sits beside him. Snow falls gently over New York. As the car pulls up to the curb, three armed figures emerge from the darkness and open fire. A hail of bullets tears through Castellano and Bilotti, leaving both dead in the street. Just a few yards away, inside a dark-tinted car, John Gotti and his right-hand man Sammy the Bull Gravano watch in silence. Thus began the reign of John Gotti. 2 years later, in 1987, an unexpected conflict brought Gotti closer to the DeCavalcante family. Gaetano Vastola had been arrested for assaulting a record executive who refused to pay extortion money. While in prison, he met Gotti. The new Gambino boss quickly began to distrust Vastola, fearing he might cooperate with the government. Gotti asked John Riggi to have Vastola killed, but Riggi refused. That refusal changed everything between the two families. On the 4th of January 1988, the body of Vincent Rotondo, a prominent DeCavalcante member, was found inside his car in Brooklyn, riddled with bullets. Rotondo had been managing major union rackets in the city and, according to some, aspired to seize full control of the organization. Riggi didn't hesitate. Rotondo had to be eliminated before he could act. At his funeral, both DeCavalcante members and Gambino representatives attended. On the surface, relations between Gotti and Riggi appeared cordial. But that same day, Gotti called Riggi to a private meeting. According to Anthony Rotondo's testimony, when John Riggi walked out of the meeting, he was pale as a corpse. Gotti had been clear. The DeCavalcante family would now answer to him. A new order was being imposed. By the late 1982, John Gotti made a request that could not be ignored. Fred Wise, a businessman with connections in the sanitation industry, had recently purchased an empty lot in Staten Island along with two mobsters. On that property, they began dumping toxic medical waste on a large scale. Authorities discovered the operation almost immediately and opened an investigation. Weiss was facing serious criminal charges, and both Gotti and Riggi feared he might turn informant. He had to be eliminated. Gotti approached Riggi and asked him for a favor, to handle the job. For the DeCavalcante boss, it was a golden opportunity to strengthen ties with New York. Riggi met with Anthony Rotondo and explained the gravity of the assignment. The order didn't come from just anyone, it came from a family boss, and that meant the job had to be done at any cost. On the 11th of September 1989, Vincent Palermo, Anthony Capo, and a dozen mobsters traveled in 4 SUVs to New York. They set up near Weiss's girlfriend's apartment. When Fred Weiss stepped out of the building and approached his car, Palermo and Capo intercepted him and shot him point blank. The murder was quick, clean, and decisive. The DeCavalcante family had fulfilled John Gotti's request. But even that wasn't enough. Despite their efficiency and loyalty, the North Jersey family was still seen as nothing more than an extension of New York, a glorified sub-franchise. That disdain deeply wounded its members, who longed for recognition as a legitimate, independent Mafia family. To make matters worse, in the early 1992s, a series of judicial investigations began destabilizing the organization. John Riggi's leadership was forced to operate with greater discretion. Resentment, external pressure, and a lack of respect began to stir an internal storm, a storm that would claim many lives. John D'Amato borrowed power, blood of his own. The 16th of October, 1989. John Riggi, boss of the DeCavalcante family, became the target of a series of federal indictments. The charges were severe: systematic extortion within construction unions in northern New Jersey. Alongside him were named his son, his underboss, Girolamo Jimmy Palermo, and soldier Salvatore Timpani. All three were implicated in the illegal control of Local 394, a key labor union that served as a cornerstone of Mafia power in the region. On the 20th of July 1990, John Riggi was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Palermo was acquitted, but the damage was done. The leadership was left vacant. The family, fractured, entered a state of crisis. From prison, Riggi set up a temporary ruling committee to keep the structure intact. The veteran mobster Gaetano Vastola, despite facing his own legal troubles, was appointed acting boss. His experience and seniority justified the choice. But soon, Vastola was also sentenced to 10 years in prison for extortion. He disappeared from the stage, unaware that his fate was already sealed. From New York, John Gotti and his right-hand man, Sammy Gravano, had already begun planning his assassination. His replacement was chosen in advance, an ambitious mobster named John D'Amato. The 1992s were dark times for the North Jersey family. Still under the shadow of the Gambinos, its members began acting with increasing violence, desperate to prove their worth. And after Riggi's fall, that violence turned into a wave of blood. The streets of northern New Jersey were growing more unstable by the day. John D'Amato, now acting boss after Vastola's downfall, was no legitimate leader. He was a puppet of the Gambinos, willing to sacrifice his own men to earn New York's favor. For many within the DeCavalcante family, that was an unforgivable betrayal. D'Amato had accumulated power as capo of the city of Elizabeth, controlling labor extortion and sharing gambling rackets with Charles Majuri. But his loyalties lay elsewhere. That was when a silent conspiracy began to take shape. In 1991, the first sign of sabotage appeared. Luis Larasso, one of the family's longest-serving administrative members, vanished without a trace. D'Amato suspected that Larasso planned to use Majuri to take the leadership from him. He decided to eliminate him before he could act. On the 11th of November 1991, Larasso went shopping with his wife. Later, they visited their daughter for dinner. After the meal, Larasso stood up, said he had somewhere to go, and left in his wife's car. He was never seen again. After his disappearance, a quiet but powerful figure began to emerge. Steve Vitabile, the longtime consigliere who pulled strings from the shadows. Vitabile not only knew what was happening, he was part of the plot. He didn't trust D'Amato, nor anyone he considered a threat to his influence. Secretly, he had conspired against several members of the organization, and now, with Larasso out of the way, D'Amato was his next target. The leadership of North Jersey was collapsing from within. The internal war was no longer a possibility, it was inevitable. Sex, scandal, and blood, the secret that condemned the boss. Late 1991. The DeCavalcante family was trapped in a violent and growing conflict. Corpses piled up, alliances broke apart, and soldiers began turning against their own bosses. At the center of this storm was John D'Amato, still acting as boss, but increasingly seen as nothing more than a puppet of the Gambinos. While D'Amato maneuvered to stay afloat, an unexpected revelation sealed his fate. Anthony Rotondo, a member with access to the organization's inner circles of power, was in a relationship with a woman who, after a violent argument, revealed a compromising secret. According to her, D'Amato regularly attended sex-swapping clubs in Manhattan, where he not only participated in orgies, but also engaged in relations with men. Rotondo wasted no time in sharing what he had heard. The information quickly reached Anthony Capo, a captain with clear intentions of getting rid of D'Amato. And in that scandal, he found the perfect excuse. In Mafia culture, homosexuality was not merely taboo, it was seen as a direct threat to a boss's authority and to the organization's respect among its New York counterparts. D'Amato was already viewed as weak. This rumor made him a problem that had to be erased. Capo, Palermo, and others began to plan the hit. Meanwhile, Consigliere Stefano Vitabile traveled to the Federal Correctional Center in Butler, where John Riggi was serving his sentence. There, he informed him of everything: the rumors, the captain's outrage, and the proposed assassination. Riggi did not object. With the boss's approval from prison, the plan moved forward quickly. At the same time, Vincent Palermo continued consolidating his role as a key figure. Born the 4th of June 1944, in Brooklyn to an Italian-American family, he had humble beginnings. As a boy, he served as an altar boy in his parish. But his life changed at 16 when his father died. His mother, suffering from severe asthma, was unable to work. Palermo found a job at New York's Fulton Fish Market. There, among blocks of ice and crates of fish, began the rise of a future capo. Over the years, Vincent Palermo earned a solid place within the organization. His nickname, Vinny Ocean, came from his job at the fish market, but his real reputation was built on other traits: emotional coldness, an instinct for spotting weakness, and an innate gift for silence. In 1965, at just 21, he married a woman connected to the family of Nick Delmore, the former boss, who had died the year before. He was also a relative of Simone DeCavalcante, who quickly took him under his wing and began bringing him to the family's headquarters, the Kenilworth Plumbing Company. There, he met the heavyweights of the clan. Alongside a Gambino family capo, Palermo began running a lucrative loan sharking racket. He was ruthless yet discreet, preferring silence to boasting, and he was rarely seen in criminal social clubs. He never talked more than necessary. Throughout his career, he was arrested only once for stealing shrimp at the market where he worked. In 1977, he was finally initiated into the family as a made man. With time, he divorced his first wife and remarried, though he always maintained a strong bond with his first family. By the 1982nd, Palermo was already a wealthy man. He lived in a lakeside mansion and, like so many other mobsters, needed to launder his fortune. His solution was Wiggles, a strip club on Queens Boulevard he used as a legitimate front. Between his large family, his visible businesses, and his growing influence, Vinny Ocean was at the top. But his real rise would come in 1989, when he eliminated Fred Weiss on John Gotti's orders. The hit, carried out alongside Anthony Capo, not only won him favor with the Gambinos, but positioned him as one of the most powerful and feared men in northern New Jersey. With D'Amato removed and Palermo consolidated, a new era began for the DeCavalcante family. But the price of ambition was only just beginning to be collected. I cut him to pieces. The DeCavalcante hitman. Anthony Capo was born in 1959 in Staten Island, New York, into an Italian family. Although he finished high school, his interest in studies was minimal. He tried to become an asbestos removal technician, but paid someone else to take his final exam. The result: a fake diploma and zero real knowledge. But his future was not in books. By the late 1000, 980, Capo had been officially identified by authorities as a member of the DeCavalcante family. Then, under the direct influence of John Rigi, over time, Capo built his own operational crew in New York, proving his value as an enforcer. At the same time, he ran a loan sharking scheme with Joseph Watts, a high-ranking German-Italian associate tied to the Gambinos. The operation, active from 1986 to 1994, generated more than $12 million. But Capo's true legacy was not his finances. It was his brutality. Addicted to cocaine, impulsive and violent, he was the kind of mobster bosses called when someone needed to be punished as an example. He used guns, knives, fists, and he did not bother to hide it. His reputation among peers grew for another reason. He loved to talk about his crimes. In a conversation recorded by authorities, he can be heard boasting proudly about how he attacked a man who owed him money. The account is raw, direct, and terrifying. On the tape, Anthony Capo recounts with satisfaction how the debtor burst into his bar screaming, demanding the money he had borrowed. I smashed his face. He didn't die, but I destroyed him. I cut him all over. He was left in shreds, like dog meat. Then I dumped him in the trunk of the car. That was how a man who had made violence his calling card spoke. January 1992. After months of internal tensions, the DeCavalcante leadership secretly decided to eliminate John D'Amato, their acting boss. The motive? An explosive combination of factors: his submission to the Gambinos, his sexual scandals, and the growing distrust within his own men. According to the traditional rules of the Cosa Nostra, a hit against a boss had to be approved by the Commission, the Mafia's highest governing body. But this time, they chose silence. They didn't want to alert John Gotti or trigger interference from New York. The decision was made: kill D'Amato without permission and without warning. D'Amato had returned to Brooklyn after a trip to Florida and was visiting his girlfriend when he received a call from Anthony Capo. Capo invited him to lunch. D'Amato accepted, suspecting nothing. He walked to the corner where Capo and another mobster, Victor De Chiara, were waiting for him in a car. He got into the back seat and calmly said, "Let's go eat." But as De Chiara began to drive, Capo from the passenger seat turned around with a gun in his hand. Bam! A shot to the face. D'Amato died instantly. Stomach cancer. The boss who should never have been. Giuseppe Joe Amari was born on the 14th of March 1945 in Raffadali, Sicily. In his youth, he lived through the darkest side of his homeland. According to reports, he once murdered a police officer in the town of Corleone, which at the time was under the control of one of the most ruthless mafia bosses in Sicily. After the crime, he fled to the United States, where his real story would begin. Over time, Amari earned a reputation both feared and respected. Within the DeCavalcante family, he rose to the rank of captain, establishing himself as a violent, profitable, and highly influential mobster. During John D'Amato's rule, Amari strengthened his ties with Stefano Vitabile, the consigliere who pulled the strings from the shadows. Although it was D'Amato who promoted Amari to the position of acting underboss after Louis Laraso's disappearance, it was Vitabile who guaranteed him real power. When D'Amato was eliminated by internal order, Amari became a key figure in the administration of the family. He took charge of all rackets linked to the construction industry, and was appointed official consultant of Local 394, a union dominated by the Mafia. Under his control, profits skyrocketed. But his rise was also the result of an unprecedented internal conspiracy. After D'Amato's sexual secrets were revealed thanks to the testimony of Anthony Rotondo, a large group of mobsters took part in the operation to kill him. Among them were figures of financial crime, such as Philip Abramo, known as the Wall Street Criminal. With D'Amato out of the picture and the structure reorganized, Amari was officially named boss of the family, marking the beginning of a new era in the history of the DeCavalcante clan. But not everything was calm. By the mid-1992s, a new conflict broke out between Amari and the New York families. particularly with the Gambino and Colombo clans. At that time, the Colombo family was struggling to recover from its third internal war, while the Gambinos were still reeling from the fall of John Gotti, brought down by the betrayal of his right-hand man, Sammy Gravano. Meanwhile, Amari had begun recruiting mobsters rejected by New York, such as Lou Vallario and Gregory Rago, who for various reasons could not be initiated in the city. New Jersey thus became a refuge for New York's outcasts. At first, the fact that Amari's recruits operated out of New Jersey didn't seem like a problem. The real conflict arose when Lou Vallario and Gregory Rago began expanding into Manhattan. There, they opened a profitable social club on M Street and established a series of rackets in territory controlled by the New York families. Although they paid tribute to Amari, this situation deeply angered the North Jersey mobsters, who saw how the new boss's influence was spreading beyond acceptable limits. To avoid an open war, the three families involved, DeCavalcante, Colombo, and Gambino, organized a meeting. The Colombo family sent their acting consigliere, the Gambinos sent their boss Carozzo, and the DeCavalcante family was represented by Amari and Stefano Vitabile. After a tense negotiation, an agreement was reached. The DeCavalcante family would no longer be allowed to initiate members born or based in New York. They could only recruit men from New Jersey and southern Philadelphia. It seemed like a reasonable pact. But just as the waters began to calm, the most unexpected blow arrived. In 1995, Amari was diagnosed with stomach cancer. The disease was advanced. He had little time left to live. Aware of his deterioration, he proposed the creation of a leadership committee to ensure the family's internal stability. Among the chosen names were Palermo and Vitabile, two key figures to maintain control during the transition. But while the family prepared for the coming power vacuum, Palermo faced his own legal troubles. The strip club Wiggles, which he used as a front to launder money, had come under the scrutiny of New York City authorities. A new law prohibited any adult establishment within 500 meters of schools or churches, and Wiggles was right at the center of the conflict. Defenders of the business argued that it was a form of freedom of expression protected by the Constitution, but local authorities were clear. Those zones promoted violence and attracted criminals. In 1995, a middle ground solution was introduced, the 60/40 rule. According to this regulation, a venue could continue operating if less than 40% of its floor space was devoted to adult activities. Palermo accepted the rule. He reduced the visible operation and hid the true business behind the curtain. But, while he fought his own legal battle, Amari's illness worsened, and the time to plan his succession was running out fast. Following the 60/40 rule, Vincent Palermo kept 60% of the venue empty to comply with the law, while in the remaining 40%, he continued to run his lucrative adult entertainment business. It was a legal facade that allowed him to keep his flow of illegal money alive without raising suspicion. But while the business survived, Giuseppe Amari did not. In 1997, his condition became critical. Confined to a hospital bed, Amari died on June 14 at the age of 52, the victim of an aggressive stomach cancer. His death opened a new power vacuum within the DeCavalcante family. Everyone wanted a piece of the throne, but no one knew for sure who should occupy it. It was then that Stefano Vitabile made an unexpected and unprecedented decision. He institutionalized a three-man committee as a new model of leadership. It was a unique solution. No other family had ever tried it. The committee was intended to maintain internal balance and stability in New Jersey, at least until a natural, undisputed boss emerged. Vitabile would not only act as the mediator between the three capos, but also as the real power behind the scenes. On paper, it was a peaceful system. In practice, it was a ticking time bomb. While this was unfolding, the landscape of organized crime on the East Coast was changing dramatically. The Patriarca family of Boston and Rhode Island had been devastated by court cases under the RICO Act following its civil war in the 1992. The five families of New York were also suffering massive arrests and a gradual decline in power. But the DeCavalcante family did not seem to be facing the same blows. For the first time in decades, the New Jersey Mafia was not in crisis. They had less legal pressure, more flexibility, and a growing sense of confidence. For years, they had been seen as New York's little cousin, a satellite crew with no real weight. Now, with New York weakened, the DeCavalcante family saw their chance to shine. They had solid interests in construction, gambling, loan sharking, and adult entertainment. In their communities, they were respected or feared, and unlike other regional families, such as those of Denver or Street Louie, they were not being dismantled. In fact, they were generating millions. Everything seemed to be going well, until January 14, the $3.2 million heist, clumsiness, cameras, and freefall. Early morning, the 14th of January 1998. 3 men, Richie Gillette, Melvin Folk, and Mike Reed, all from Brooklyn and in their 40s, quietly enter the lobby of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. Dressed like ordinary office workers, they blend in unnoticed among the crowd of employees arriving for their first shift of the day. But under their clothes, they're hiding pistols. They take the elevator to the 11th floor, where a Bank of America currency exchange office is located. There, they wait patiently, as if they were regular workers. Outside, the key moment approaches. An armored truck from Brinks arrives at the building. 2 guards get out, carrying $3.2 million in cash, half of it in foreign currency, and take the bags up to the 11th floor. When the elevator doors opened, the 3 robbers sprang into action. They aimed their guns, overpowered the guards, tied them with tape, and filled sports bags with the cash. Then they sent the elevator with the guards still inside to a floor under construction, while they calmly went down using another lift. In the lobby, they made their first mistake. They took off their masks. Right in front of a security camera, they walked out the door as if nothing had happened, unaware that they had just left their faces clearly recorded. Moreover, they had only stolen half the money, believing all the bills were in US dollars. But much of it was foreign currency far more difficult to move. Hours later, their photos were on every news broadcast. The police issued arrest warrants, offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to the 3 suspects. The criminals were known in Windsor Terrace, a neighborhood with a strong mafia presence, where they weren't well liked. And with such a high reward, betrayal came quickly. Days after the robbery, 2 of them were arrested. But 1 was still missing. While 2 of the thieves were already in custody, the 3rd, Richie Gillette, was still on the run across the southwestern United States. He traveled by train, looking like a tired, unkempt man, with a small, discreet bag by his side. A security officer patrolling the carriages as part of a new anti-drug protocol briefly questioned him near Albuquerque, New Mexico. Nothing seemed suspicious. Gillette remained calm. But the officer had just stood face to face with the last fugitive, without knowing it. When he realized his mistake and rushed back to the seat where he had seen Gillette, the man was gone. The police launched an intensive search in the area. Hours later, a local barman called the police. Richie Gillette was sitting right in front of him, drinking calmly. The officers arrived immediately. But Gillette, unaware he was being hunted, had gone to the bathroom just before the officers entered. When they looked inside, he wasn't there. No one had seen him leave. They assumed he had escaped. They left the bar. Gillette was still inside the bathroom, waiting. Shortly after, he returned to the motel where he was staying. 2 agents were already watching him, one from the car park and another questioning the receptionist. Gillette walked out wearing different clothes, no longer in his usual sports outfit. As he passed by the agent outside, the officer recognized him, quickly approached, restrained him, and handcuffed him. The 3 direct perpetrators of the heist were now captured. But then, the FBI went further. Something didn't add up. The robbery, though poorly executed during the escape, had been planned with precision, with knowledge of the location, timing, and logistics. They couldn't have done it alone. After a thorough investigation, federal agents identified a fourth key figure in the plot: Ralph Garino, an associate of the DeCavalcante family. A new chapter was about to begin. And this one went far beyond a simple robbery. The informant, microphones, betrayal, and silent war. Ralph Garino was not your typical mobster. Short in stature, with a well-groomed appearance, and always dressed with meticulous precision, he wasn't known for his violence or physical presence. His specialty was something else: theft, planning, surgical strikes. For years, he operated in New York, managing a network of illegal petrol stations and working behind the scenes, where money flowed more than blood. After the World Trade Center robbery, the police uncovered his involvement. Garino had contacted an employee of the building, a man named Salvatano, who had provided him with an internal access pass. This employee, linked in turn to a third party, informed him of the exact day and time of the money delivery. Garino and his partner used that information to plan the heist. The plan was carried out, but after his public exposure, time was running against him. Ralph tried to get rid of his share of the loot to avoid being caught with the money. He failed. Less than 10 days after the robbery, the police knocked on his door. Garino was arrested. The agents presented him with the evidence and the charges. And then came the master move. They offered him a deal. In exchange for cooperation, he had to wear a hidden microphone and record his associates. Garino accepted. And what the FBI heard through his device was explosive. In northern New Jersey, a civil war was quietly beginning to brew. At the center of the conflict were Vincent Palermo and Charles Majuri, both members of the panel that led the family. But tensions were deep, and Majuri was already planning to have Palermo killed. His goal? To become the absolute boss. To achieve it, he sought the support of a loyal soldier, James Gallo. But things did not go as expected. Gallo, having learned of the plan and disagreeing with the method, decided to warn Palermo. He revealed everything: the plot, Majuri's intentions, and the conspiracy that was forming against him. Palermo, shrewd as always, decided not to react immediately, but to buy time, observing how the pieces moved on the board. And while all that was happening, Garino kept recording everything. The FBI, satisfied with Ralph Garino's effectiveness as an informant, provided him with a batch of mobile phones with hidden microphones. The idea was simple. Garino was to present them as untraceable, illegal devices for the organization's operations. He complied. He went to a butcher shop in Elizabeth, New Jersey, a regular meeting point for mobsters, and handed several of those phones to trusted men. One of them was his own driver and longtime friend, Joey Masella. Masella, born in 1948 inches Brooklyn, grew up in the same criminal environment as figures like Vincent Palermo. His father died by electrocution while working on the railway, and Joey was left under the care of a mentally unstable and abusive mother. From a young age, he became involved in criminal activities, and Palermo, seeing something of himself in him, took him under his protection. He gave him a small crew of men, among them Capo and Gallo, and placed him in charge of a large illegal betting scheme. For a time, Masella was relevant. Money flowed, his position was solid, and he acted as Palermo's personal bodyguard. But the years took their toll. After getting married, he moved to Staten Island and fell into a spiral of gambling addiction. His businesses began to falter. His debts grew, and his fortune vanished. By the late 1992, he owed more than $450,000 to loan sharks and lived in fear, hiding, unable to leave his home. Meanwhile, Garino, whom he now drove himself, spoke openly in the car about money, opportunities, and business, unaware that the FBI was listening to every word. The two spent nearly all day together. The car was their mobile office and their tomb. Palermo, tired of Masella's chaos and incompetence, already had his solution prepared. And it would take shape through a familiar figure: Charles Majuri. The stain, betrayal, fear, and the final price. Vincent Palermo felt danger approaching. He suspected that Charles Majuri, his rival within the leadership panel, was conspiring against him. Fearing for his life, Palermo decided to strike first. He organized a team to assassinate him: Joey Masella, Anthony Capo, and James Gallo. The three men waited outside Maggiori's house, hoping to catch him off guard. But they had no concrete plan. They simply waited for him to come out. After a long wait, they noticed an unforeseen obstacle: a state police patrol car parked nearby. It belonged to a neighbor, but its mere presence was enough to deter them. Nervous, they canceled the mission. Masella, feeling like a failure, fled to Florida, fearing retaliation. From there, he called Palermo to tell him he would not continue with the plan. With that, his last chance for advancement within the organization disappeared. He had failed. He could no longer hope to become a made man, a full-fledged member, or regain his mentor's favor. Palermo, now calmer, reevaluated the threat posed by Maggiori. He concluded that it wasn't real. He had the support of the capos, and although leadership was technically shared, he was the one truly pulling the strings. The contract on Maggiori was cancelled. But with Joey Masella, the story would be different. To the New Jersey mobsters, Masella had become an embarrassment. A weak, indebted, impulsive, and discredited man. His mere existence was becoming a threat to the family's image and control. Palermo knew he had to act. On 10 October 1998, Masella received a call from Steve, a bookie linked to the Mafia who owed him money. He said he had $10,000 in cash to give him, and provided a meeting point. Masella got into his car and drove to the location. But there was no one there. Something inside him started to feel wrong. He received another call, a new location. With no other options, he went there. When he arrived, Greg, one of Palermo's trusted men, was waiting with several others. Masella understood immediately. Bam! A gunshot. Masella was rushed to hospital, but it was already too late. The story of Joey Masella ended that night. But Ralph Garino's was about to reach a dead end. After Masella's murder, Vincent Palermo began a deep restructuring. He knew that if he wanted to transform the DeCavalcante family into a legitimate and respected mafia organization, he needed to cut ties with past mistakes and cleanse internal weaknesses. To achieve this, he turned to Joseph Sclafani, an old-school mobster known for his experience, discretion, and firm hand. Sclafani was appointed to oversee Garino and Stabilise operations. At least on the surface, the family entered a period of renewal and order under Palermo's leadership. But the calm would be short-lived. Within months, a series of unexpected events began shaking the foundations of the organization. Although it appeared prosperous and stable, the DeCavalcante family was facing increasingly serious internal and external threats. Authorities were intensifying surveillance, internal rivalries were resurfacing, and mismanagement was becoming more evident. The apparent solidity of the organization was beginning to crack. And so, almost without warning, the first signs of its final decline emerged. A perfect storm was on its way, one that could erase the name DeCavalcante from the streets forever, and from the history of organized crime in the United States. Thank you for joining us until the end of this true story, one that inspired fiction, but far surpassed it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next documentaries. Your support is what allows us to keep telling hidden, dangerous, and fascinating stories from the world of organized crime. See you next time.